Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to go over the figure and how I normally do figure invention. So, let's get started. Alright, guys, so I'm going to be using a 4B pencil. The reason I'm using this is so it shows up on screen. So, keep in mind, when I'm going to draw right now, I normally don't draw this dark. This is what I do, but I don't draw this dark. So, we're going to talk about figure invention. The first thing you do is I think of three things every time I draw the figure. I think of the head cylinder, the rib cage, and the pelvis. And I use these things to represent those. I use a square, a circle, and a smaller circle, you know? And they're all connected by the spine. And that's pretty much the main point of any pose, you know? So, think of those. You know, you see people every day in real life, and you have a good idea in terms of the proportions of people's rib cage to their head. You know, the head's small in the rib cage. You know, pelvis is, you know, about as wide as the rib cage. You know, and I just represent it with a square because it's a little more of a square shape. But I honestly don't think you should have a set rule. There are set rules that, you know, in different books, but me or any other artist I know, we really don't use them. I didn't use them to begin with, to be honest. So I really don't recommend that. I will go over in another video how to do it. So basically, when I start any figure invention, I'll start it like that, and it's really just an elaborate stick figure. Let's say when I draw anything, I'll start with a circle. I'll always start with a head. This is just me. Start with a head. Let's say what I want him to do. Let's say I want him crouched over. I'm going to think about where his spine goes. I'm going to do the head, then the spine. And I'm going to represent the spine with a single line right there. Real easy. It's kind of the expression of your whole expression of your pose is really dictated from the spine, you know? So, where the weight and everything is going to go. And I really have no end of it yet right now. I just know I'm thinking upper body. Then I'm going to think of the torso, the rib cage. So where would the rib cage go if this guy's crouched over? You have to visualize in your mind a little bit before you actually do it. I would say the rib cage is going to go back here somewhere, and I'm going to draw through it. It's going to be behind it, like putting one ball in front of the other. It's going to overlap, and I have to keep that in mind. Overlapping is one of the biggest things that separates kind of a new artist from an intermediate artist. Rib cage is a little big, I think, but just a placeholder. Then I'm going to put the pelvis. Where would the pelvis be? Behind that. That'd be my guess. And that's going to and that's going to be behind that. Think of things in space. Think of these as a cube, a circle, and another circle, you know, a sphere. Think of them in 3D. Because the more in 3D that you think, the more realistic your your drawing's going to look. So, the other thing I do is I think of the shoulder joints. I usually represent the shoulder joints with a small ball. Let's say one arm's going over here. Draw a line there to represent the arms. Let's say he's throwing a punch. When you throw a punch, the other leg is going to be maybe coming off. I'm going to go down to the pelvis now, and I'm going to represent where the leg, the side of the hip, is going to connect to the side of the hip. These are essentially elaborate stick figures. And I'm going to draw the other foot going that direction. Maybe the knee would be down here. I'm going to have this leg go forward. That would be what I would completely start with. Like, let's say he's throwing a punch and his fist is going to be over here somewhere. That's what I start with to begin with when you invent figures. Let's do another one over here. Think of the weight, with the weight distribution. I would even, like I said, act it out. Head. Let's say lying down. How would someone lie down? Okay. So, in this one, I'm going to put the rib cage in. And then the pelvis. But I'm also going to think, the next thing I think of after I think of these three, head, torso, pelvis, head, torso, pelvis, head, torso, pelvis. Those three, the first thoughts in my mind. Head, torso, pelvis. Spine, spine's in there, obviously. Spine's like, you know, in there. So, head, torso, pelvis. Remember that. Sorry. I just want to get that through your head. Those are the three main things and how those kind of interact with each other. So, and then they're all connected by the spine. The thing I think of after all those things is I think of the angle of the shoulders, like I said over here. Sometimes I'll represent that with just a ball, or I'll represent that with a straight line, like a scaffolding. I'll think of what angle would the shoulders be at. I'll draw a line there, draw a ball for the end of the shoulders, draw the arm down to the elbow, so I connect the dots. This arm would be behind the torso. Change the pelvis a little bit. And that person would be more or less just lying down. I ran off the paper. The legs would be off somewhere else. And then from here, right, if I was to take this, and remember, I would normally draw this a lot lighter. I would take this, make these into cylinders, really try to think in 3D. Right? Think really hard. Anywho, I would more just start to flesh that stuff out. You know, I'm just kind of demonstrating how I would do that on my own. You know, put a hand at the end of there, all that stuff. Again, we're just going through different posing. One thing that's really important, and I want you to think about, is I want you to think of the gravity. I think I said that a little bit before. Think of where the weight distribution goes. Let's say he's just circle, spine. Sometimes I'll draw down to the 1 foot where, and I usually draw down to the 1 foot where all the weight, where most of the weight is distributed. And then maybe I'll draw down to the other foot to find the placeholder in my other foot. See, like you have this really bizarre looking head, like antenna thing going on right now. It's fine. It's good. That's what I start with in your mind. That's all you need. So I got my head, I got my spine, I got where my feet are going to land. Sometimes I'll do that for placement. Sometimes I'll just let them, you know, there's really no rules in this. This is just something that I do. And a lot of guys do. I'll draw the torso here, pelvis. Sometimes I'll draw it as a cube. I'm trying to think of where the hands would be. Maybe it's like, oh no. Ball of the shoulders. Now, if you were really drawing this dark, let's say you're drawing this dark. If I draw this dark, normally what I do is I do that pose. I get another piece of paper, and since it's dark enough, I should be able to see right through it. And from there, I would actually draw my detail, you know, on over that. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll do that in another demo. But, you know, there you go. You have a very, very, very simple pose. When you're also, another thing when you're talking about the head, torso, and pelvis, think of the angles of the shoulder here. See how the shoulder, I draw a line for it, pelvis. Think of the angles, because if these are the same angle, let's say from one hip to the other side of the hip, shoulder to the other side of the shoulder, let's say these are both parallel, right? If those are parallel, it might sometimes make the pose stiff. If you want a dynamic pose, you have to take this angle, and then you're gonna have to change them. You're gonna have to change it. So for example, just zooming in on the torso, like the torso, shoulders, let's say the shoulders are angled this way. We're going to angle it hard, right? It's some kind of action thing. One shoulder to the other. We're going to angle the pelvis too. Bam! It's going to look more dynamic if these, you see these two lines from one to the other, if those are like this. Think about when people walk. When you walk, these things are they're not even. You know, they're not often even. You're not like this. You're not a robot. Robots are like that, but humans are more organic and they're free flow and they're more expressive. It creates more expression if you have this. Do this. Anyways, those are some quick thoughts about how I draw the figures. Just some quick startup things. What I would do as an exercise to start up is I would actually look at videos, even of yourself, anywhere there's people. Look up videos and just start pausing them. Pause the picture and literally look at it and try to represent those as these stick figures. Because they help. They'll help. The more, you know. Let's say it's just a standing pose. Okay, do the ball for the head. Okay, if they're walking, represent them with the torso. This is what I did when I started. And this is what everyone I know did when they started. You represent them through these little simplistic stick figures, and it'll get you after you do a few dozen of these or a few hundred of these, you'll get a good idea for proportion, which is really what everything is based off of. This is like building a building, and you have the scaffolding, you have the skeletal structure first. You know, when you build a building, you have the skeletal structure first, and then you put all the cool stuff on top of it, right? This is exactly the exact same thing. We're doing this, but with people. We're building this, you know, the skeleton, the thing in which everything is built upon. You are doing it first. You know, that is the first step, and it's the core. Really, it's one of the cores to drawing the figure. So the more you do that, the better your proportions will be, and the better your figures will come out, and the better the sense of distribution and weight you will have. So I do it from, and we're trying to imitate life. You know, we're trying to also accentuate life. So that's why I'm telling you, do it from a video, and just do a ton of these little skeletons. You know, a ton of them, just a ton of them, and just, you know, leave them as is, and then, you know, that's a great way to get your get your brain motivated. And because the truth is, when we're drawing something, usually it's just a library of information in our minds. You know, we're gonna store the more movies you pause. I would get movies like Lord of the Rings or what else? Let me see, any comic book movie, you know, or go through comic books and do this exact same exercise, and you will be storing these poses, different poses that you see from movies. You will be storing them, you know, in your mind. You're forming a library in your mind that you're gonna go back to later. This is how I normally draw poses. See, I do the exact same thing but lighter, and then I'll go over it. Anyways, guys, I hope that helped at all. I have no idea if that helped, but if you have any questions, let me know. And thanks a lot, guys, for listening to me. I appreciate it.